Hello, everyone, and welcome to my corner of the internet. As many of you may know, this past month has its own annual art challenge, and that is Mermay. I feel like this challenge is not quite as widespread as Inktober or even November, probably because, well, it's very specific, and if drawing fish people is not really your cup of tea, the idea of drawing them every day for a month is probably not too appealing. If you followed my art for a while now, you've probably noticed that I don't do a whole lot of mythical creatures. While I do like to add some strange and supernatural elements to my stories, I also like to keep them sort of grounded in reality. My favorite genres are gothic and magical realism, which do tend to have strange things either interwoven with ordinary things or only sort of hinted at, which is much more appealing to me for some reason than complete fantastical species and such. So in my entire art career, I have never once drawn a mermaid. But, it's always good to push yourself and get out of your comfort zone once in a while, so I thought, why not try? I ended up having an absolutely insanely busy month, so instead of stressing myself out even more by trying to do all 31 days of the challenge, I decided that I would pick 4 prompts, one for each week. I used the prompt list by Shaygoyle on DeviantArt, which I will link down below. There are a lot of great prompts there. And as with all these challenges, you don't necessarily have to do them in the month or year that the challenge specifies. They're fun to do at any time, so if you think you'd like to try drawing some more people, I'd highly encourage you to try out some of these prompts, because there are a whole lot of fun ones that I didn't get around to using. The first prompt that I decided on was Galaxy. As soon as I read this prompt, the image of a mermaid swimming through space came to my mind. Completely randomly. That concept is a little surreal, but I thought, none of this makes sense anyway, so why not just go crazy? For my reference photos for the mermaid's poses, I was able to find some stock photos of underwater photography, so I could see examples of how land humans move in water, with the water resistance and all that. And then I basically just took those poses and added tails where the legs should have been. So that is a tip if you are not sure where to start with drawing mermaids. I'm not entirely sure why this mermaid is wearing a t-shirt. That is not something that I've seen in any other illustrations before, really. But, I am the weirdo that swims with a long sleeve rash guard and a skirt, so I don't see why some mermaids might not want to dress more conservatively too. Especially this one, who isn't actually swimming in water, so she doesn't have to worry about her clothes getting waterlogged. The next prompt was waves, which brought to mind some imagery that's been stored in the back of my mind for some time now. And that's the sight of waves that have caught up a bunch of loose seaweed in them. If you don't live near the beach or spend a lot of time there, you might not have seen this before, but it is a truly terrifying sight. Especially if you're 10 years old and you've drifted way too far downshore from your grandma, and you genuinely believe for a moment that those seaweed tentacles could legitimately be a giant octopus, and you're convinced that the beach is so empty that no one will hear you scream, even though it's obviously a massive over-dramatization. And I would not be speaking from experience here at all. But after the initial terror of seeing a seaweed-filled wave for the first time has passed, you're left looking at the gross seaweed wave and wondering what else could be inside that wave. After I saw the seaweed wave for the first time, my biggest fear has always been that I'll see a shark or something swimming inside the wave. Of course, that's a pretty baseless fear because you'd almost never see a shark that close to shore, especially not if the waves were rough and seaweed-filled, but it's still a scary thought. So with that same thought process, I decided to draw a mermaid swimming or maybe body surfing inside a seaweed-filled wave, because if I saw this at the beach, I would run away screaming so fast, because that is really pretty creepy. And I'm sorry, I was not able to get my recording software to work for this, so it's just the still image. Anyway, the third prompt was Clownfish. I feel like one of the most famous symbiotic relationships in the natural world is the relationship between sea anemones and clownfish, or anemone fish, as they're sometimes called. Maybe this is because of Finding Nemo, I'm not really sure. It's always also been one of my favorite symbiotic relationships, most likely because of, Finding Nemo, which was one of my favorite movies when I was younger. So basically, sea anemones have these stinging tentacles, but the venom in those tentacles don't affect the clownfish, which probably has something to do with the mucus coating that they have. And this resistance allows them to basically use the anemones for shelter and protection, since their potential predators are affected by the venom and can't get them when they're hiding in a cluster of those tentacles. The fish also help the anemones because they scare away predators that might try to, bite off the tentacles. And also, did you know that there are pink clownfish? I got a little distracted looking up reference photos, and I ended up learning a lot more than I bargained for. Of course, with this design, I went with the classic orange and white striped clownfish. There are actually other organisms that have symbiotic relationships with anemones, including some crabs and snails, where the anemones actually live on their shells or claws, which is pretty cool. But anyway, I eventually went with the idea of a mermaid who is half human and half clownfish, and who lives amongst the sea anemones with the regular clownfish. The proportions in this picture definitely imply that this mermaid is significantly smaller than a human, which makes the whole situation a little bit weirder, but I guess it's also kind of cute. She's sort of like a sea fairy. The final prompt that I planned to do was crystal. Of course, the first thing that popped into my mind was Crystal Cave, like at Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park. But of course, since this is a mermaid, I decided that I was going to go with a sea cave. Now, as you may know, I'm completely spelunkophobic, and I really, really hate the idea of being trapped in a cave. The only thing worse than being trapped in a cave is being trapped in a sea cave. If you went through the California elementary school system, you've probably read Island of the Blue Dolphins, which is a great book and one that I definitely recommend. But it also contains a scene that absolutely traumatized me as a fourth grader. At one point during the story, the protagonist kayaks into a sea cave that's under the island that she lives on, but then the tide comes up and she can't get back out because the entrance is now underwater. There are also these skeletons in the cave because at some point in the past, some people were basically buried there, so she's trapped in this cave with the dead people all night until the tide goes down again. Of course, if you were this mermaid, that wouldn't be a problem for you. I also decided to add these giant crystals that I've seen in some photos of caves. I don't know if crystals like this would be able to form in an actual sea cave, but this is kind of like a fantasy setting anyway, so it doesn't really matter because I just thought it looked cool. I also have no idea if the crystals that the mermaid seems to be wearing as jewelry are actually part of her, like if they're growing from her body, or if they just form from minerals, or if they're like actual jewelry that the mer people in this cave make and wear. But honestly, as I was drawing this, I was just trying not to overthink it. A good portion of my thought process while drawing all these mermaids was going towards overthinking their biology. Like, why would there be a humanoid creature with fishtail living in the ocean? Are we to believe that at some point a group of humans evolved the ability to live underwater and just sort of split off from the land humans? Are they related to humans at all? Do they have gills that we can't see? Or are they marine mammals that have lungs but are just able to hold their breath for a significant amount of time? And why do they have hair and unwebbed fingers and eyes that really seem like they'd work best on dry land? If they've evolved the ability to stay underwater for so long, wouldn't they have some other adaptations that would help them swim and hunt in their new environment? Now, I realize that there are plenty of other designs that do take these factors into account. So if I was really concerned, I could have gone with a hairless, web-fingered, and gilled sea creature. But for my own personal entertainment, I went with the less creepy-looking, like, half-human, half-fish version, because I feel like that looks better with my art style. And that concludes my first ever Mermay adventure. I ended up really enjoying this challenge a lot more than I expected, and I never really want to leave my artistic comfort zone of historical characters and landscape paintings, but I'm always pleasantly surprised when I do. Maybe I might even try committing to doing every day of the challenge next year. Who knows? We'll see. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. Bye.